Hello, my loves from the Betrayal Diaries channel. This time I'm going to be straightforward and tell you all the details of this delicious story that I've been keeping for a long time. I always knew that my relationship with my mother wasn't the best. At 60, she was always distant, immersed in her own worries and occupations, as if her life were a separate universe from mine. She cared in a way that always seemed cold and distant to me. In contrast, my stepfather, John, 32, always had a more open and welcoming approach. The age difference between them seemed to create a more fluid connection between the two of us. He saw me in a way that my mother never could, with eyes that reflected more attention, support, and sincere admiration. It was as if he knew exactly how to make me feel seen, as if he complimented me in a natural way, without haste or demands. He gave me the attention that, in so many years, I had never known how to ask for. This, in a way, made me feel comfortable, but at the same time, an uncomfortable feeling began to grow inside me. I felt connected to him in a way that went beyond the support he gave me. I began to wonder why this connection was so strong, so peculiar. That night, like so many others, my mother took her sleeping pills. It was her routine, a way of disconnecting from the world and getting lost in her own needs, as if that was the only moment she could find to meet herself. The house was completely silent, and for a moment, everything seemed normal, but something was different, something I couldn't explain. I was alone, but curiously, I didn't feel lonely. The silence somehow became a safe space where I could reflect on myself, on my life, and on all the feelings that, for so long, I had tried to hide, even from myself. It was in this silence that my stepfather entered my room. He appeared unannounced, as if there was nothing strange about his presence there. I didn't know what to think or do, but part of me didn't want him to leave. John had always been my friend. He had always been there, like a constant presence, an anchor in my life, even at times when I didn't know what to do with all my own feelings. He had never been more than that, always kind and considerate, but from time to time, I began to notice something different in his gaze, something I had never noticed before, but which now seemed impossible to ignore. He always had this affectionate, almost protective way about him, but suddenly it all seemed to carry an emotional charge that I didn't know how to deal with. Sometimes I found myself lost in his eyes, trying to understand what he was trying to communicate, as if he was somehow talking to me without using words. That night, however, he turned up unannounced, something that wasn't typical of John. He was always more careful with our routine, with our space, but that night, he came into my room out of the blue. I was surprised, a strange feeling settling in my chest. I didn't know what to do or how to react. He walked in with that familiar smile, but I soon realized that there was something different about the look in his eyes, something that made me question the situation. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice soft and low, as if there was genuine concern in his tone. I hesitated. I wanted to answer, but the words seemed to have disappeared. I was confused, lost in my own thoughts, but I also felt a growing anxiety, as if everything around me had suddenly changed. He was closer than usual. Every step he took towards me made my heart race, and I could no longer distinguish between what was friendship and what was becoming something new, something fraught with a tension I didn't know how to handle. I felt like I was in uncharted territory, a space where the boundaries of our friendship seemed more tenuous than ever, and at that moment, I no longer knew what it meant to be just his friend. The line between what we had always been and what we could be seemed to have blurred, and I found myself lost in this new space. John took a step forward, and immediately, the tension between us intensified, charging the room with a palpable electricity. Something in the air seemed to make my body alert, as if every cell was tuned into him, and I couldn't look away any longer. It was as if he knew exactly what was going on in my mind, as if he could feel the internal clash that I was trying to hide at all costs. He was there, waiting, silent, but with a presence that said it all. His eyes were fixed on mine, intense and penetrating, as if looking for a reaction, a sign, something to make me take the first step. I couldn't understand what was happening, but my heart raced, and a warm wave of sensation spread throughout my body. It was as if I was being enveloped by an electric current, an uncontrollable energy that both frightened and attracted me. I felt torn between being there with him and the thoughts that were swirling around in my mind. thoughts that I had tried to hide even from myself, feelings that I had always kept buried deep down, but now it seemed impossible to ignore them. My stepfather then touched my shoulder, a gentle gesture, almost imperceptible, but loaded with meaning. That touch was like a mute invitation, a silent challenge, as if he were testing my limits, asking me to come closer, to give in to what was already happening. His eyes never left mine, and the depth of that gaze took my breath away. Something deep inside me trembled, as if he were trying to reach a place that I myself didn't know existed. There was a pressure there, but a silent pressure, a feeling that there was no more running away, no more denying what was happening between us. He looked at me as if to tell me, without words, that the connection we were experiencing could no longer be ignored. And then, without knowing exactly where the courage came from, I kissed him. At first, the kiss was shy, hesitant, as if we were both trying to understand what it meant, what would unfold from there. But, to my surprise, he returned the kiss with an intensity that made me lose any remaining shyness. When his lips met mine again, I felt a wave of desire that made my skin burn. Every touch, every movement he made me lose control, and I gave myself over completely. That kiss, which started out shy, soon turned into something deeper, more urgent. I felt the same hunger in him, the same longing, as if he wanted me as much as I wanted him. His fingers explored my skin with a softness that burned, touching my arm, my shoulders, and slowly moving down, drawing trails of fire wherever they went. I surrendered to every touch, every sigh, feeling a growing heat, a desire that could no longer be denied. My hands, without thinking, began to explore too, touching him with the same intensity. The warmth of his body against mine, the strength with which he enveloped me, made me forget everything around us. I no longer knew where my desire began, and his ended. We were lost in each other and nothing else mattered. And so we spent the night, enveloped in that intense energy, without thinking about the consequences, without wanting anything more than to surrender to what was happening between us. I didn't know how it had happened, or how things had taken such a turn. Everything seemed so confusing, and despite all my efforts to understand, the truth was that nothing would ever be the same again. Something had changed in me, in a way that I couldn't explain, but that was impossible to ignore. John's gaze, his touch, were engraved on every part of me, and I didn't know how to deal with it. Every time I closed my eyes, I relived those moments. Like a movie I couldn't stop watching. I tried to understand what it meant, how to fit those emotions into my life, but it all seemed in vain. I couldn't find an answer. That night, while the house remained shrouded in a deep, almost deafening silence, a part of me finally understood that something had awakened inside me, something I didn't want to accept, something I had never known how to control. It was a mixture of confusion and intensity, something that slipped out of my hands, as if out of reach, but at the same time so present, so real. John's gentle touch, that penetrating gaze full of intent, made me realize that what had once seemed so clear and certain was now blurred, cloudy, impossible to understand. It was as if the line between what I knew and what was now taking me over was dissolving. With the silence of the night around me, I felt even more trapped in my own thoughts. I knew deep down, without a doubt, that my life would never be the same again. I didn't know how to move on, or what to do with the whirlwind of feelings that was now consuming me, but one thing was undeniable. Everything had changed, and I didn't know how to reverse it. It was as if an invisible line had been crossed, and now there was no going back. I didn't know if I was ready to deal with it, but I knew that from that moment on, my story would never be the same. Maybe, one day, I'll be able to understand what really happened between the two of us. Maybe, with time, I'll be able to see that meeting in a new light and understand what it meant to me. But for now, all that was left was to live with the feeling that something big, something irreversible, had begun, and that there was no way I could go back to who I was before. I still see him looking at me sometimes, with that look full of desire. There's something in his eyes that doesn't go unnoticed, as if he's always looking for a way to get closer, to find some moment or some opening for something to happen between us again. And as much as I try to push this thought away, there's a part of me that wonders, is this what I really want? Was what happened just a mistake? Or is there something more between us? Something worth exploring? I think of my mother, and the weight of this situation hits me. She would be destroyed if she knew. I know that. The pain she would feel would not be something simple to bear. So I find myself wondering if I should just stop, forget everything that has happened, ignore this growing connection and carry on with my life as if nothing had changed. It would be the safest choice, the easiest, but I don't know if it would be the best, because at the same time, a part of me believes that I should be honest with myself, look at my feelings without fear, and maybe even open up to him, allow something real between us to happen, without any more fear. After all, why not be happy? Why not experience something that makes me feel alive? I find myself in this dilemma, in this space full of uncertainties. Sometimes it feels like there's no right choice, just a series of consequences that I don't know how to deal with. I look at it and feel a mixture of anxiety and desire, and I wonder if, by giving in to this impulse, I'm simply seeking happiness, or if it will only lead to more suffering. I really don't know what to do, and that's where I'm asking for your help. What do you think I should do? Be true to my feelings and risk losing everything, or give up what I feel to protect those I love? Let me know in the comments. I really need to hear what you think.